people always assume that what Revelation's goal is to predict the end of the world.
Right.
And my response back in Thinning the Veil, and whenever I talk about it, is no, that goal is way too small for the book of Revelation or the Bible.
Yeah.
Prediction is such a cheap trick compared to transformation of a human that is broken. It is just not even close.
Welcome to A Theology of Hustle. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, and follow me at Theology of Hustle on Instagram. Now, let's get to work. All right. Well, I am here today with Dr. Shane Wood, who is a professor of New Testament and its origins at Ozark College there in Joplin, Missouri. Shane, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Man, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's good stuff. All right. Well, let's just kick it off and let's do the quick overview. Who are you? What do you do? All of that stuff.
Yeah, I'm a husband of over 22 years.
Nice.
I have 4 kiddos ranging from 21 all the way down to 12. So keeps us busy. It was one of those things I was telling my wife the other day. I said, whenever our kids became adults, I didn't think we were done, but I thought it'd be easier, and it isn't. There's a lot more questions and a lot more at stake with their questions now than ever before, but it's great. And then I've been teaching here at Ozark Christian College. I just finished my 16th year, so it's been a fun ride so far.
I love it. That's awesome. Although I was hopeful. Our oldest is 15, and I was hoping that there was an end to. So for you to tell me that is a little dispiriting, but
not to be a bearer of bad news at the very beginning. I just, I don't know. I knew when they left, I knew it wasn't like you're done, but I think I thought, oh man, it's gonna be so much more easy now, and it's just not. Like the amount of conversations is wild.
Yeah, I had a sneaking suspicion that that's how it was going to be, but there was also a little bit of hope. I feel like it gets harder, but in different ways. Like when they're little, it's so time consuming, and you just are with them all the time and feeding them. But as they get older, they're so much more fun in certain ways, but demanding, maybe more emotionally and that sort of thing. So
no, that's exactly right. And a lot of the answers to their questions when they're kiddos is change the diaper or feed them. You know,
right?
But now it's like, yeah, bro, you're gonna have to sit in that pain, and there's no way for me to rescue you, and that just hurts as a dad.
Yeah, you want to fix it, right?
Yeah. But it's good.
Okay.
It's good. It's been it's been good.
Okay. That's good. Good to know. I love that. So let's just get kind of started. I'd love to maybe just trace your career journey a little bit. We talk about work and theology, so kind of understanding how you got to where you are is an important part of that. So what led you to kind of becoming a professor and going down this path?
I still don't know if I want to be a professor. Okay. I just happen to have been one for over 16 years.
I get that.
And on some level, that even kind of, gives you an insight into my story. So, actually in high school and even getting ready to go into college, I was big into musical theater. And so I thought I was going to Broadway. That was my focus. And then there isn't some weird, Augustinian or Martin Luther moment when the Lord spoke. I just ended up not going. I don't really even remember totally. I just ended up in Joplin, actually at Ozark, where I teach now.
Okay, gotcha.
And once I got about a semester in here, I was like, "Yo, I can't get enough of this." And primarily, it's and this even in some sense, as we dive in later, my undercurrent for a lot of my focus on my work is curiosity. I have questions that I need answered, and I even to the point where, and even this comes out in books that I write and things sermons I preach. A lot of the times, the questions that I have are questions that for me are so foundational and so essential that if I can't figure out an answer, I don't even know if I can continue to be a Christian anymore. Like for me, it's this visceral pursuit that I fell in love with as an 18 to 22-year-old. And then I knew I was going to serve the church. And so I went actually into full-time ministry, doing, associate minister, which is code word for anything and everything the senior minister doesn't want to do. So I was leading worship and doing youth and teaching Sunday schools and preaching on occasion, and then doing my master's. And I went to Lincoln Christian University to study under a guy by the name of Dr. Robert Lowry,
Okay.
who passed away a little over a decade ago.
Mm.
But he had done his PhD on the Book of Revelation at the University of Aberdeen, and so under I. Howard Marshall. And I thought, okay, I want to study Revelation more, and because it grabbed a hold of my heart in my sophomore year of undergrad. So I studied under him, and then I took a year off and then went right into my PhD, but not because I wanted to be a professor, but because of calling. You know, I talk about this a lot. Like a PhD is not really, I don't believe education is really even just a means to an occupation. I think it's an entry point to transformation. I think that's the way that Jesus engaged in education, and Socrates before him. And education makes you into someone different. And my story was such that I had such deep levels and layers of brokenness that I knew I wasn't done being formed.
Mm.
And so dove into my PhD, University of Edinburgh, under Helen Bond, who was at the time, she was the world's leading scholar in Pontius Pilate and Caiaphas. And I was wanting to wrestle with how does the book of Revelation intersect with the Roman Empire, with its imagery. And so she was a great guide for me. And then it just so happened when I started my PhD, my alma mater was like, hey, we have an open position. Would you want to teach? And I said, hey, that might be fun to do for a while, but I'm not making any promises. But now I'm in my 17th year. So I don't really know. That's how I got here.
Okay, that's a good story. Well done. I was so curious about Revelation. I feel like there's just not that many people that get into Revelation in general, right? It's one of those
Sure.
books of the Bible that very mysterious. I feel like inaccessible
Yeah.
for a lot of just common people in the pews, right? And probably, I would guess most people have never really interacted with it much.
Hmm.
So, what was it about Revelation that just kind of captured your heart
Yeah.
there?
It really was that, what you just
Mm.
described. You know, I grew up in the church my whole life, but we never talked about Revelation. And you know, the first time I even interacted with Revelation, I was a junior in high school. It was in the summer. I was coming home late for curfew. So I'm racing home in my little Geo Metro that I lovingly called my Skittle. And so I'm, got my little roller skate going down 4061 in the St. Louis area, and came up over a hill, and there was a blood red moon,
Mm.
and it freaked me out because I was like, oh no, the world's going to end, and I'm so young, I have so much more to do in life, in this kind of freak out moment. And so I went home, skirted around my parents that were sleeping because I didn't want to let them know I was late for curfew. But I went over to the shelf and grabbed off the Bible and went to the book of Revelation. I thought if the world's going to end, Revelation apparently has something to talk about it. I don't really know because nobody ever told me. And so the first time I ever read Revelation was like 1:30 in the morning as a high school student, and I remember setting the book down around 3:30 in the morning, and I was scared out of my freaking mind. I mean, I was just terrified. And so when I got to Ozark, my freshman sophomore year, I was like, okay, I want to study this book because I don't want to be afraid. If it's the word
Mm.
of God, I'm assuming he didn't put it in there just to terrify me. Now maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but that's at least what I thought. And then come to find out, my hunch was right. Like it was a book that latched onto my heart because it isn't a book that's supposed to scare us or cajole us into bouts of prediction. It's a book that is supposed to comfort us and to challenge us and to encourage us to persist in a world that frankly seems to be losing its mind. And it's just grabbed a hold of me, and it's just never really let go.
Yeah, that's good. And that's one of the. I mean, that comes through in the book, right? And
Hmm.
we'll get into more of that, I am sure. But man, it was uh, reading a book. I'll go ahead and say it. The book is called "Thinning the Veil," right? It's a understanding of Revelation, and to read a book on Revelation and it be devotional was like,
Hmm.
this is not how this usually goes, right?
Sure.
I've read, lots of books on Revelation from different perspectives, but never one where it was like, I felt closer to Jesus afterwards. But
Mm.
that's like the point, right? The whole Bible, right? That we know more about him, that he's revealing himself to us.
Yeah. And isn't that wild that your testimony is so normative? It's normative.
Yeah.
Like most people, when they think of Revelation, they do not think that'll draw me closer to Jesus. Usually it's like, that book's freaking weird, and the people that read it are just as weird, if not weirder. So let's stay away from that as far as we can. Uh, but I talk about this in the book, but it just struck me. I'd been studying Revelation for almost 25 years.
Yeah.
And I sat down to read or write this book, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've overlooked the first 5 words of the book. This is the revelation of Jesus Christ. I'm like, it tells you at the beginning what
Yeah.
it wants to talk about. It wants to talk about Jesus. And it's usually, and this is the way that every book of the Bible works, though. We come with our agendas, asking the king to bow his knee to what we desire or what we want. And Revelation's the one that pushes back and says, actually, I have things I want to talk about that may make you uncomfortable. And yet, it's essential for the body and for the individual to bow their knee to the king, that in his tenderness, all he wants to do is reach out, touch us, and heal us. And so I was very grateful for that IVP academic, which that's why I kept saying, I'm like, are you guys sure you're okay? Because my goal of the book, I told them this later as it started unfolding. I said, okay, here's what's coming out, and I apologize. I said, definitely we're going to have some exegetical meat in here. Like we're going to dive deep into some of the, little details of the book and some of the Greek. I said, it's almost like Eugene Peterson, Richard Bauckham, and myself all kind of sit down together.
Yes. Yes, that's a perfect description.
Okay,
yes.
good.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
and by God's grace, they were like, yeah, let's go for it. And they've been incredibly supportive all the way through it. But I knew it was a risk. And yet I felt like it was the book that the Spirit was pulling out of me.
So much so. There's so much of the Holy Spirit throughout, and you see that as you weave your own story into it. I think that's what makes it especially profound, right? This like means something to you. This isn't just a theological exercise. And like, I guess part of what has made Revelation so unapproachable for most people is, like you said, Richard Bauckham, right? His book on Revelation, the theology of Revelation, incredible. But you need some sort of a theological education to even like start digging into that thing. I mean, it is in depth. And so what you do is you unpack Revelation and you never say ism. There's never
right.
a premillennial ism. There's no isms to it. No. And I feel like, I guess I'll pose this as a question. Do you feel like the isms are what have made Revelation so unapproachable for us?
Oh, I think that's a good insight. And I think that this happens with not just Revelation, but with talks of atonement.
Right.
I know there's a scholar that recently put out a book on the issue of salvation and atonement, and all of the isms came out of the woodwork to frankly just destroy the conversation.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I love about church history, though, is that whenever you look over the last 2,000 years, the church has not been afraid to have conversations about significant things, knowing that the mysteries are so deep, we're not going to be able to solve them, even if we can grab a portion of them.
Yeah.
And what the isms always try to do is to reduce the profundity of God's mystery down to a syllogism, or down to a box that is, it's almost like we're attempting to conquer that which by definition is boundaryless.
Yeah.
So without question, all of the premillennialism, amillennialism, postmillennialism, even preterism, historicism, what they try to do is it's almost like we're staring at this Picasso painting. And every one of the isms has their color, and they refuse to acknowledge the existence of any other color. And it perverts the beauty of the tapestry. Wow. And so, no, I had no intention of describing my isms or anybody else's, because frankly, I find them to be boring.
Yes.
But I also find them to to really be abortive of productive conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, you're exactly right. And so much of that's, I don't know, us needing control probably
Yeah.
of something, right? And so we put it into this box, and like you said, the councils, the great councils,
Hmm.
Nicaea, right? They're not putting boxes around things. They're giving you these places. Hey, don't go past here. You know, we're not figuring this out. We're not labeling everything, but we're
That's right.
telling you what's not, like a negative view of theology,
Yeah,
in a good
I
way, I
no,
guess.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I tell my students, I say there's a big difference. There's a big difference between guardrails and railroad tracks. Like
Right.
there's a massive difference. They
Yes.
both even may have comparable substance, but guardrails give you all this levity. They just make sure you don't fly off the road, but you can do all kinds. But railroad tracks, they dictate the every curve where you're allowed
Mm,
to go. And most people are most comfortable with theological conversations like railroad tracks. They think that they have solved it, or some people hold that. I'll use a different metaphor. That their theological structure is built like a Jenga set,
mm,
and they're always terrified if you ever grab any one of the blocks out because they're afraid the whole thing's going to topple.
yeah.
But I try to tell my students, I'm like, listen, your theological systems. I'm not saying don't engage in. I'm not even saying don't have opinions, but you need to hold it more like each theological position is a spring on a trampoline, where that when the tension is there, you're able to bounce and have fun and even have all kinds of. But
Yeah.
you're allowed to pull one off and still bounce and
Yeah.
even replace it, and everything's still okay. But it's the tension that brings about the beauty.
Mm,
And that to me is what was my goal of the book, but frankly, it's also my goal as a teacher and preacher of the word.
yeah. That's good. That's a great metaphor, man. Your word pictures are just really helpful. I definitely appreciate that. I think there's been a lot of grace in my life. Like I think about, I became a Christian, or devoted my life to sort of ministry and theological study at 19. And like
Hmm.
at 19, between 19 and 20, like in undergrad, I knew everything, right? I had it
Yeah,
all figured out, right? And so the last like 20 something years have just been like me realizing that I don't have anything figured out. And so like the theological systems I just hold so much more loosely than
yeah,
I did when I was in my early 20s, and it felt like life and death,
yeah. And those systems are valuable conversation partners if they
Yeah.
allow everybody at the table.
Right.
But to me, that's part of the issue. Is a lot of the times a theological system will claim a reservation over the entire conversation, over the entire table, and not allow anybody else to have a question
Right.
about the system. And the church has always been unfolding the mystery of God's revelation, and I use that much broader than just the name of the book.
Yeah.
But through conversations and questions, as we push deeper into the mystery of the incarnate God, the infinite one that poured the fullness of His being in
Yeah.
bodily form. I mean, I'm like, come on, allow the mystery to be the mystery, and allow us to be the ones that get to swim in the ocean of it.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, if you could figure out this God, he would cease to be God, right?
Well, it'd cease to be worth being worshipped. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Okay. Well, let's go the next level of nerdy, right? And,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
jump into the book of Revelation. So, how about let's start here. Why you unpacked a little bit of this, but why decide to write a book like this? Why did this book need to be
Mhm.
written, and what's kind of the, like, I guess, elevator sort of pitch of this book?
Yeah. So I think the best way to do biblical study
Hmm.
is to unearth the text while simultaneously allowing yourself to be unearthed by the text.
Hmm.
And so it's this reciprocal vulnerability that the biblical text invites us into. It's the same type of, to use the language of Michael Gorman, this reciprocal residency where Christ is in us, but we are in Christ. It's the same thing whenever I come to the Bible. It's I'm going to use every tool I have to unearth this, from church history to Roman history to the Greek text to you name it. I'm going to use every tool I have to unearth this text, but I'm going to allow the text to do the same to me. And so what thinning the veil is all about is, I mean, that's why I begin chapter 1. I begin with really embodying the author, not just arguing about who the author is, although I do have opinions about that with Revelation, but asking the question, okay, this John figure, if he has been exiled by the Roman Empire onto the island of Patmos, what is he going through as a human? Not just as a Holy Spirit inspired author, but as a human, as a son of a family, as one that's been entrusted with the mother of Jesus, as a one that's been preaching and traveling to these churches and burying members of his congregation and marrying and baptizing and now he's away from all that. And so I begin. It just so happened that as I was writing it, I've these last 5 years or so, personally, professionally, been really tough for me. And a profound loneliness had already kind of been something I had been processing. And maybe somebody will accuse me of projection, and that's fine. But I don't think it's a stretch to see the writer of Revelation, John, also overwhelmed with this sense of loneliness as he's separated from all that he loves and all that love him. And so what I found though is that in that intersection with me allowing the text to unearth me and me unearth the text, I found that it tapped into things that were just profoundly human. This to me is the beauty of the biblical text. I really get bored when people hijack the biblical text and they use it in the modern day, divorcing it from the ancient context that it was in.
Yeah.
That to me is not just irresponsible; it's disrespectful, and it's irreverent. It's just a completely unnecessary way of engaging the text. And I know what we're doing there. We are, like you mentioned earlier, we're looking for significance and meaning in our own life. And a lot of the times the way we think we can find that is by grabbing it away from someone else. It's the kindergarten issue of learning how to share. We don't know how to share very well when it comes to the biblical text. But the reality is that every letter of the New Testament, Revelation included, we're overhearing a conversation
Yeah.
between a pastor and his people. And in overhearing that, we're able to siphon and to bring things into our space that minister to the things that are breaking us. And so I think one of the first things I quote in the book is my journal. It's like a journal entry from like 3
Yeah.
in the morning where me and the Lord are having talks that are very psalm-like. They're very raw.
Yes. Yes.
But I think that that's the best way to engage biblical study. Your
Mm.
full story, your full self, your struggles, and it ultimately, because that's all of that is what makes us human.
Yeah.
And that's the question I've been asking my students recently too. Is I say, y'all, you're growing up in a generation where you are going to have to be able to answer, as pastors in the church, you're going to have to be able to answer the question, what does it mean to be a human? Because with AI and things like that, the question of humanity, of what does it mean to be human, is very different than what it was before.
Mm.
But I told him, I said, I'll give you a hint. We can no longer pretend that emotion has no part in defining what it means to be a human.
Yeah.
Because the one thing that separates me from ChatGPT is I feel the information. I don't just give it.
There is a lot there that is very profound. There's a lot to unpack there. Honestly, you're exactly right. I wonder, with modernity, so I'm thinking of a biblical interpretation. I think one of the things that most modern interpretation, higher criticism have left out is the actual humanity of the authors, especially, right? Like that they take away like how good these authors are at writing and the
Yeah.
intentionality behind all of this. And I just wonder if like you aren't like just have your thumb on something like a really important part of biblical interpretation isn't necessarily all of the tools and knowing which translations, and golly, you can just go, but humanity. And do you have a thought on how you might encourage people in the pews, right? People listening to this, how would they go about sort of bringing more humanity into their own study
Mm.
of scripture?
Yeah. That is a great question with a really difficult answer. And it's not difficult in the way to explain, it's difficult to receive the answer.
Okay.
Because the answer is this. If you really want to get more in touch with your humanity, you need to go to the dark places of your heart that you've hidden away from even God.
Hmm.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
truthfully,
No, I'm with you. I'm with you 100%.
it's like, listen,
Yeah.
I believe every single human needs to go through significant times of counseling,
Yeah.
where you pull out the greatest. Like I've been public about this in both writing and in preaching before, but like I had to come to terms with the fact that at 6 years old I was molested by my babysitter, and that really shaped not just my fear and my trauma, but it really shaped even my relationship to things like work. Like, so for example, I finished my PhD.
Yeah.
It's in 2013, 2014, something like that. The PhD sent to me in the mail. The diploma's in the mail. I'm sitting on the couch. I open it up. My wife comes, sits down next to me, and she's like, "What are you thinking?" I said, "Well," I said, "I'm thinking I thought this was going to feel different." And she's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Honestly, I don't know." And over the next couple of years, I realized that even though I had this like thing that people promote, or promote me for,
Yeah.
it actually was an expression of my brokenness that I hadn't dealt with yet. The way I was medicating my wound of not having told anyone for 25 years about being sexually abused was through work. I just
Mm.
worked and worked and worked and worked and worked, and whenever then I kept going to the next level, and then I get my PhD, and I think deep, deep down, I thought this will heal me,
Right.
and when it didn't, I mean, I spiraled.
Mm.
It took me a couple of years to get my feet back under me to even write anything again. And that the reason why is because I was like, oh shoot, for the last 15 years I've been pursuing one direction, desiring healing, but that tool that I was using was never meant to heal me. It
Yeah.
was meant to unite me with the depths of who God is, because I think work and Sabbath both are expressions of the Imago Dei.
Mm.
But heal me? It's almost like going to the law and getting upset with the law that it can't save me.
Yeah.
No, that's not what it was ever. It was holy. The law is holy. Romans
Yeah.
says the law is holy, but it is not holy, not set apart in order to restore the relationship with God that's broken. It's to unveil what is actually broken in the relationship.
Mm.
So, if you really want to bring your humanity to biblical study and to really be transformed through study, you have to be willingness to take your hands off the wound. It's the way I've described in a sermon before, where it's like, I've had 4 kids, so we've had a lot of bike wrecks. Like I said, it's funny because every one of them, their bike wrecks are very different, and the way they respond to it's very different, yet all the same.
Yeah.
They
Yep.
scream like they just got amputated. They then come up to me and they have their hands on their knee. And the first thing I have to do as their dad is to convince them to take their hands off the wound so that healing can actually begin.
Mm.
The bummer is then we got to clean it. And so it's going to hurt more. And then the next 24 hours or so, it'll hurt even a little bit more. But then eventually it'll start to heal. And then depending on how deep it is, you might have a wound. And
Yeah.
and the wound is an expression of deep healing of a deep wound.
Mm.
The problem is most of us in the church are walking around with our hands on our wounds, and we don't understand why it is that our families or our churches or even our country, we don't understand why they're falling apart. Well, it's because we're not willing to actually entrust the light with what only the light can handle. The darkness cannot heal what is broken in us.
Mm.
But we keep going back to the darkness and our secrets, thinking this time, it will heal me. We are basically addicts when it comes to hiding our brokenness. And until we get over that, the Bible's not going to be able to do for us what the Bible wants to do. And that's to transform us completely into the image of Christ.
Wow. Shane. Oh my gosh. Yes. So much yes. Thank you for sharing that. So to become a better exegete, I need therapy. That is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, actually. I was always told as a student, context is king and
Yeah.
interpretation context is king. And now that I'm a professor, I say, actually, holiness is king.
Mm,
And what I mean by holiness is emptying of yourself to receive more of him. But the problem is most of our brokenness takes up most of the space inside of us, and he can't find a way to develop more space until we let go of it.
yeah.
So, and if the Bible really is inspired, it's kind of like, I do this. I don't know if the audience will be able to see this or not, but I'm holding up a cup. And even if I dump an infinite amount of water into this cup, it'll still only be able to hold about 10 ounces because that's how big the cup is.
Yeah.
So if God wants to bring all of himself into us in the same way that he poured himself out on the cross, the problem is if this is as big of a cup as I have to receive, that's all of him I can actually have. But how then do I expand the cup? By actually allowing more stuff to be in the cup, by pulling out the stuff that's in it. And that is our wounds and our brokenness and our secrets and our patterns of unhealth and our sin and our, like, confession is an entry
Mm,
point to biblical study. It's divorcing our addiction to the satanic language that has entrapped us, so that we can speak a better grammar. And that
yeah.
is the language of the Spirit. That's the language of Christ himself.
Mm. That's profound. I'm also married to a therapist, and she's going to be very happy to hear this. So,
So this is a plug for her,
yeah,
and I'm all for it.
there you go. There you go. It's like the exegete and the therapist combined, right there. So
That's
the two of
awesome.
us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
My wife's a spiritual director.
okay. Okay.
And so yeah, this, having people that are trained to
Yeah.
either help us deal with how our past, this is how I look at therapists, they help us deal with how our past is disrupting our ability to be present.
Mm,
Life coaches typically find ways to help you understand how your future is disrupting you to be present. And
right.
spiritual directors come along and they say, now let me help you figure out how your present is disrupting your ability to be present. And so if you can grab all those, it's really helpful.
That's great. That's great. It's a great breakdown. I love that. That's awesome. Not where I thought we would go, but that is profound there. Okay, let's jump into more of Revelation. Maybe we'll start with the simple question: what do most people get wrong about the Book of Revelation?
Yeah. I think we mentioned it. We've kind of mentioned it in passing already, but there's two things in particular that I always try to emphasize. Number one, people always assume that what Revelation's goal is to predict the end of the world.
Right.
And my response back in Thinning the Veil and whenever I talk about it is no, that goal is way too small for the
Mm,
book of Revelation or the Bible.
yeah.
Prediction is such a cheap trick compared to transformation of a human that is broken. It is just not even close. And so you have these people that will even engage in pseudo prediction, from tarot reading cards and things of that nature. And the thing is sometimes they will get things right.
Yeah.
But that's not, even when God does accurately predict the future, and he does,
Yeah.
it's always in service of something greater than merely predicting the future.
Yeah.
It's usually to startle us out of rebellion or to challenge us to step forward and to engage with deeper endurance with the suffering that is surrounding us. The book of Revelation has a bigger goal than prediction because every prophet, all prophetic books are always written to a people that are in a time period of suffering and persecution that are either crumbling or in flat out rebellion. So when Revelation 1:3, when it says, blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, if you understand what a prophecy is, the people in the pews of Revelation are going, oh, shoot. You saw that? It really is. And
Yeah.
that leads to my second thing I would say that people miss when it comes to Revelation is they forget that chapters 2 and 3 introduce the book. This book is written to real people at a real time going through real issues. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of like this. It's like picture if a pastor is commissioned to write a letter to his people. This is literally what Revelation is. And then he goes, okay, I know you guys are struggling under Rome. I know you guys are struggling with compromise. I know some of you are in flat out rebellion. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to talk about something that will happen over 2,000 years from now that will not impact you at all.
Yes.
And you stop and go like, all right, thanks. You're a bad pastor, but thanks for this exercise
Yes.
in dreaming.
Yes.
No, Revelation was written by a good pastor to people going through real issues. And when they read it, it actually challenged them to transform into Christ in the context that they were living and struggling in.
Yeah. That is great. One thing that really did strike me about the beginning of the book is how much time you did spend on chapters 1, 2, and 3. Because I've even taught Revelation some, and my natural inclination is just to get to the weird stuff as quickly as possible.
Right.
It's like 1, 2, and 3 is like, that's fine. But the humanization of John and the humanization of the churches to whom the letter's being written was just a profound unpacking, and leads. It's the interpretive framework so much for like moving forward, right? If you don't have that kind of lens, then it changes how you see the book of Revelation.
Absolutely. Every image will be, and I'm going to use the word tainted, but I don't mean that always in a negative way. It'll just always be influenced
Right.
by your entry point. And if your entry point is prediction, or if your entry point skips over the first 3 chapters,
Right.
then you'll be looking for Apache helicopters when you get to the trumpets. But
Yes.
if the first 3 chapters matter,
Yeah.
like if John didn't slip the quill and like accidentally, wrote the first 3 chapters, but he didn't mean to, if those matter, then you'll be asking different questions by the time you get to chapters 8 and 9. You just
Yeah.
will.
Mm.
And so that's why I think in the book, I don't totally remember, but I think in the book, chapters 8 and 9, I actually talk more about the tenderness of God's pursuit and his call of us to pursue our enemies with love, which I think is what the trumpets is all about.
Yeah.
Regardless of how they respond. It's kind of like a Romans 12 move. Like you keep peace with everyone in as much as it's up to you.
Right.
But you pursue them with love, not this grasps of power or these explosions of anger that for some reason, especially in the West and especially in America, we think is the pathway to advancing something we find valuable. But really all it's doing is just playing right into the hands of the enemy.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. It reminds me, you even mentioned this, your wedding ceremony that you do. You pull from Mark 10. Matthew 20 is one I've preached on a lot. The same passage, but the sons of Zebedee, right, arguing over who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom, and Jesus' message to them is, you have no idea what you're asking for right now. Right. Like, you don't understand the cross. You don't understand what's about to happen. Right. And we're the sons of Zebedee, the Western world, America. We're that. Trying to figure out who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom, who's going to protect Jesus on the road to the cross, right? We'll pick up the sword and slice the ear, right? And we'll go to war for this guy, and all the while you're the one actually denying him in all of that. Yeah.
And at a certain point, we have to stop and this is where being like a trained historian's helpful, where I just stop and go, okay, I understand that's the tool that you think is the most important in this moment in this situation.
Right.
However, the history of that tool, it always produces the same thing over and over and over and over. Are you sure that's the tool you want to grab?
Yeah.
It's like prediction with Revelation. Yeah. Okay, it's produced one thing over and over and over and over. You didn't get it right. Like Jesus still hasn't come yet, in the amount of eclipses and the amount of Antichrist figures and the amount of blood red moons and the amount of wars and all of the time that this stuff happens. I get all kinds of emails. Is this the time that's the end? And I'm going, okay, can we just stop using this tool? We're not good at it. It is not delivering what we think it is. So let's pick up a different one and try a different tactic. Maybe these are written not so we can play this cosmic fortune teller in the sky game. Maybe this is written so that we can figure out how to actually be the kingdom of God on earth right now that doesn't celebrate over the deaths of our enemies, or doesn't, God help us, compel us to point a gun either metaphorically or literally at someone that we disagree with
Right.
because their point is different than ours. It's like Christ doesn't call you to that.
Mm.
And this is where Revelation is not messing around, because when Rome is crushing them, the question of whether or not they pick up violence and kill their enemy is a one that has a real world implications. And Revelation says, here's what I'm calling you to do. Live like Jesus. Even whenever the world is crumbling around you, live like Jesus. And
Yeah.
that to me is a call that takes a courage that I'm not sure a lot of us have, myself included.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the call. like,
Yeah.
and that's where I think, as people of the book, as my tradition would call us, it's like, okay, but are we going to pick which portions of the book that we're going to take seriously, or are we going to take all of it? Because if we take all of it seriously, we're going to have to change a lot of the things we do on social media. We're going to have to change a lot of the different, news stations that we're obsessed with. We're going to have to take more seriously how we're living in the shape of Jesus and not just celebrating what Jesus did for us.
Yeah.
There's difference. There's a difference between celebrating his salvation and actually being transformed into the image of the cross.
No, I think so good stuff from all of that. Yeah, it is profound, and this understanding of empire, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're in that right now, right? In so many ways, with so many Christians sort of taken captive.
Mm-hmm.
At least I'll speak for myself. I think so many Christians taken captive with politics,
Mm-hmm.
where it's becoming more of their religion than actual Christianity is.
Mm-hmm.
In so many ways, it's like Revelation is speaking directly to us right now in so many ways, and we're just kind of missing it with all these predictions, right?
Yeah, and here's what's interesting about that. I when that is exactly right. But what's happening with people and their I don't know how to I don't want to know how I want to say that. What's happening with people and their losing of themselves in politics
Yeah.
is actually something that I think as church leaders and as church teachers we need to stop and reflect on, because typically how people are responding in the pews is a reflection of us that are leading.
Yeah.
And so it's a time of self-reflection as opposed to accusation. They're doing something wrong. No, they're responding to what it is their leaders are giving them. And what are we giving them? I think what's happening is that this is a natural outcome, a natural result of the seeker-sensitive movement over the last 30 to 40 years, and which I've been a part of,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I've even implemented. Like, this isn't
Yes.
this is
Guilty.
this is self-reflection.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I got long hair. Let's make sure we're doing everything we can to bring people in, and I love that.
Yeah.
The problem is that now what people are expressing is, but they long to have something that they can be sacrificed for. They long to have something they can sacrifice for and be sacrificed for. And politics has given them what it is that the church has not been preaching and offering to them. Because this is the call of the church. This is the reason why we should not be taking away the cross as decorations in our church, because we need to be reminded of every single day that we carry our crosses in this incredible adventure that Christ has invited us to.
Mm.
That baptism, we need to remind them, it is a complete death and a resurrection, a changing of allegiances that you can get lost in. Revelation calls us to this unbelievably high cost of discipleship. But the church, in its evangelistic zeal, so again, it's not even a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's just that now that the pendulum has swung all the way, we're having unintended consequences that we now need to confront. And I think the best way to do it is to be honest with the cost of what it means to follow Christ. What it means to follow Christ is you bow your knee to one king, and whatever he says, you do. And he says, take up your cross daily, deny yourself, and come follow me. You become the first fruits, Revelation 14:3. First fruits is an image of sacrifice. You are a burnt offering on the altar of the Lord, or a
Mm.
living sacrifice, as Romans 12 would say. But the key thing about this 144,000 in Revelation 14 is, it says in verse 3, they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. And where does the Lamb go?
Yeah.
He goes to Calvary, he goes to the cross. So this reminds me also of another text that I've been doing a little bit in my wedding sermons, I was like, you know what? Let's just, instead of just Mark 10, 35 through 45, let's just go right into Ephesians 5, where it talks about, husbands, and wives, like the,
Yes.
the bombshell passage of
Yes.
wives submit to your husbands. And it's, first of all, I always say, like, okay, I think he's actually saying the same thing to both men and women. He
Yes.
says it in 3 verses for women, but he has to do it in like 12 for men, which tells me something about how difficult it is for us to get it. Number
Yes.
one.
So much yes.
But number two, it's like when he says, you love your bride the way Christ loved the church. Like, it's like, and what did Christ do for the church? He laid his life down for her. Like my wife and I never have to ask the question, who's the boss?
Right.
Because when you are obsessed with serving the other person, when you're obsessed with laying your life down for them and they for you, you never have to ask, so who's going to win? Because you both are actually, you're willing to lay down your life for the other so that the other can win. And when you both are doing that, it's this weird synergy of mutual winning that we typically don't find, not just in marriages, but in churches, and especially not in politics.
Yeah.
So frankly, where we're at today is a result of us leaders. Like that's the thing. I have very little tolerance for leaders that love to throw rocks at churches or people in the pews, or, well, they're just getting it wrong. Okay, well, look in the mirror first, and then we can
Right.
talk.
Yeah, no, that is a great call. That is profound, for sure. Yeah. Thanks for talking through that. It's good stuff. Um, okay, so I thought we would probably step through Revelation. I feel like it's probably not happening though, because we've gotten into so many other good things. But I just want to highly encourage people, like all of I guess what I found as I read the book is just all of the stuff that usually trips people up, all the really complicated things where you get bogged down in like the details and stuff. I feel like you have intentionally sort of just like smoothed all those things over, and just this understanding of how you don't get really bogged down in the details. There's a helpful appendix about numbers and how to understand them in Revelation, but it's not at the forefront, right? Or the colors necessarily. Can you talk a little bit just about how you thought about, like, that unpacking all those metaphors and all those visual images? Yeah.
Yeah, no. So to go back to the beginning of what you said there is, and yet what we actually are talking about, or have been these last 47 minutes, is Revelation.
It is.
It's
It
just,
very much is.
it's just not the Revelation that we're familiar with.
Yes.
But
Yeah,
this is what
exactly.
Revelation wants to talk about. It wants to talk about, how do you live today? How do you live in light of the cross today? And so when I'm going through the images, and I do in the book, I go through every single chapter of Revelation, but it is this reflecting in the way that we are right now. And my goal is to actually have this thread, this heartbeat that begins in chapter 1 and ends in Revelation 22, that oftentimes we get so bogged down with individual images that we miss the whole forest for one tree. So
Yes.
we become obsessed with what is the mark of the beast, which is a good question, but it's not a question that deserves the amount of attention it's received.
Right.
And so what I do in the book is I say, hey, no, let's deal with it. So I even have these videos at the end of each chapter that help you go a little deeper if you want to go deeper. I have a whole video on the rapture. I have a whole video on the mark of the beast. So I understand those questions matter. But in the actual writing itself, I wanted to decentralize what it is that was more ancillary, which was more like this, this side thing in the text,
Right.
and focus on what matters most. So, for example, Revelation 12, 13, and 14, I actually wildly decided I'm going to write one chapter on all 3 of those chapters.
Yes.
which was probably the more difficult chapter to write of the entire book.
I could only
Uh,
imagine.
but what I tried to show there was, what Revelation does and does best is it pulls back the veil,
Yeah.
allowing us to see what we thought our eyes were telling us, that this politics and this empire and actually there's a greater story that's been going on much longer than any of these empires have ever reigned. And it's this cosmic unholy trinity, this dragon, Revelation 12, and these
Yeah.
2 beasts from the sea and beasts from the land, that are a mockery, a parody of the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And yet each of these trinities have a manifestation of their will on earth through a group of people. And the book of Revelation's asking, which trinity are you actually, do your actions in your life, which trinity are you actually advancing their agenda? Which one?
Yeah.
And Revelation's pretty clear. It's like, no, your actions do matter. Don't. Deeds is not a 4-letter word in the book of Revelation. It's actually essential to look at what you're doing and asking, does it match the Trinity that you are pledging allegiance to?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, then Revelation looks at you and says, then you better change, or else you will receive the full import of what it is that you have just, embraced.
Yeah.
So Revelation 12, 13, and 14, we love to talk about the mark of the beast. That really dominates the conversation. But in Thinning the Veil, what I say is actually, it is unveiling something, this unholy trinity, that is behind every empire, from Babylon to Egypt to Greek Empire to the Roman Empire to, you name the empire.
Yep.
This unholy trinity has been marching it. And this is what Revelation tells you. The empires will fall. The kingdom of God will not. So who is the enemy, and which trinity are you fighting for with how you live?
Sheesh.
So I take those images, and what I try to do is I try to use them to communicate the heartbeat, but not to get distracted by them to the point where we're talking about barcodes and things that frankly just aren't what Revelation's after.
Yeah. 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 That's so good. So good. Yes. Yeah, I appreciated the book for that. I feel like anybody could pick this thing up and like get so much out of it, and a really profound understanding of Revelation in a pretty quick read, less than 200 pages. It's pretty amazing what you were able to kind of fit into such a small, a short book relatively. So sure, it didn't feel like that.
I mean, the way I describe writing is, it's like, no, it's a painful place to go, but hopefully something beautiful comes out of it. So
yes, indeed. That's good stuff. That's good stuff. Okay. One quick, I mean, the whole point of Theology of Hustle, right, is talking about work and God's kingdom. And this, so much of it is rooted in Revelation 21, right? Where the heavens and the earth, they come together, and there's no longer any temple because God is there. And just this idea of heaven, which you speak to profoundly. And can you speak to what it means, like to connect sort of the Garden of Eden with new creation, and how it relates to work?
Yeah. Work existed before Genesis 3.
Yes.
But most of what that is holy, because of Genesis 3, we approach with the stain of sin, in the grammar of death.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a war that is actually not one that needs to be fought. And so a lot of times what we do with work is we ask it to play a role it was never intended to play. But it did have a role. And that's the thing that coming back to Eden in Revelation 21 and 22, even though Revelation chapter 14, verse 13 says, and yes, for they will rest from their labors. Rest, though, it's this combining of what makes God who he is in Genesis 1, work and Sabbath.
Yeah.
And both of them have a place, and both of them are holy, and we destroy both of them. So a lot of the times I struggle most. So I've struggled with both of those extremes, and Revelations challenged me profoundly in each. I asked work for years to heal me, and so I was a workaholic. It was an addiction, though, and every addiction is an attempt to supplant my desire for God with something that is less than. It's a form of idolatry. But work in and of itself wasn't the problem. It was my approach to it.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with Sabbath, with rest. I struggle with rest. I struggle with knowing how to rest well.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times I find that whenever I rest, I almost go to the pendulum swing the other way, and then I'm actually resting in a self-destructive manner.
Yeah.
Revelation 21 and 22 in the Garden of Eden bring us to this beautiful restoration where all of the relationships have been restored. I talk about this in the last chapter where, there's 4 relationships that are shattered in Genesis 3, relation with God and us, the relationship between humanity and humanity, the relationship between humanity and creation, and the relationship between humanity and ourselves. Um, in Revelation chapter 21 and 22, it's restoring all of these relationships that are broken. But I do believe one of the relationships that was shattered was work. Work was this profound, in developed in our bodies are made for motion, not for stagnation. And yet, without rest, or I was actually talking to a very well known theologian that I will not throw under the bus, but he goes, the only flaw that I believe is in God's creation is sleep. He said, I just think it's a total waste. And I didn't say it to him because I'm just not. It's not my style to be like, I think you're wrong, and here's 5 reasons why. I was like, that's interesting, but I went back and thought about it. And I was like, no, I just don't agree. I think what rest does is it reminds me that faith at its core is the belief that I am not essential, even though God treats me that way.
Mm.
He treats me with the tenderness of that I belong and am essential for His work. And yet every time I go to sleep, He says, and yet the work keeps going even
Yeah.
without you.
Yeah.
And that to me is what Revelation 21 and 22 brings back together. This beautiful moment where we are with God and He is with us, and our relationships with each other and with Him and with creation, with ourselves, and with things like work and rest are all brought back to restoration so that we can engage them as an entry point to encountering God as opposed to something that we have to endure.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff there. I love that. I love talking about that and this idea of work. It's interesting. I've never thought about the sleep. I don't think sleep's in the curse though, right? So, I
Not that
mean,
I'm aware of.
I would assume
I mean,
they slept before then
well,
even.
the first
So,
time that we see sleep is in the Bible is whenever God puts Adam to sleep to create something beautiful out of it, Eve.
yeah.
So I don't think sleep is a problem.
Yeah. Agreed. I would highly agree with that. I would be very disappointed if there's no sleep in the new creation.
Yeah,
So,
right?
yeah, that's good. I love it. Thanks so much for sharing. I could listen to you kind of like weave all this stuff together forever. I
Hmm.
love the way you think about this stuff, and I just appreciate your time and coming on. Are you ready to jump into the final 2 questions?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. So my first question is, what is the strangest job that you have ever had?
The strangest job I've ever had? Oh, man. I don't know if I'm really going to. Okay, so I will answer it, but it's actually my favorite job. And it's
Okay.
going to
All
initially
right.
not sound super weird. Okay, there's a story that comes with this.
Okay.
My favorite job I've ever had, though, was working at a grocery store. And here's why I also find that to be strange. It's because it was just so beautifully mundane.
Mm.
But one of the things I was in charge of was throwing away all of the milks that had gone past their expiration date, which was both strange to be the one back there looking at all of them, but it was the most delightful moment when I was like, what do I do with them? And they're like, you literally just launch them into the dumpster. And I'm like, that's my job for the next hour. And they were like, yeah. And I was like, deal. Man, bro, one day, I'm not even kidding, I misread the date and I threw away like 40 good milks, and I was so devastated. And I was like, if you have to take it out of my check, but yeah, launching milk into
Oh.
a dumpster, that was one of the most strange and delightful jobs I had as a grocery store worker.
That's like a dream job right there. That's
Yeah.
you're living the dream, man. So
I was like 17 too in high school, so
yeah,
it was great.
that's
It was
amazing.
awesome.
That's amazing. I love that. Okay, so my final question then is: what is one piece of advice you would give to somebody who's looking to bring God's kingdom more into their work?
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. I would say 2 things. I would say number 1, what we mentioned earlier, and that is one of the best ways to bring the kingdom into your work is by making sure that your work's not playing a role that you never intended to. And the only
Yeah.
way you can do that is by unearthing your story,
Mm.
and putting it in its proper relationship. And when you do, you'll find that conduit of the kingdom moving into your work, flows more fluidly. The second thing I would say though is, don't just think of work as doing things for God,
Yeah.
but shift it to doing things with God. I do believe that preposition is the most powerful preposition in the entire Bible, and that's why God embeds it into his name, Emmanuel, God with us. Our work should be doing things with God, not just for him. And that shift can be profound.
Yeah, that's really good. That is profound. And I love you talking about that preposition. I'd never thought about that, with God with us. Yeah, good stuff, man. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for the work. And it was so good to get to know a little bit more about your story.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for hanging out and listening to A Theology of Hustle. Make sure that you like and subscribe, all the things, and follow me at Theology of Hustle on Instagram. My hope is that this podcast just encourages you in your work, whatever that may be. So until next time, get out there and hustle.